Hey folks, welcome to a new Let's Play series that I had really decided I just was never going to be able to do. But it's actually going to happen now, it seems like. Um, I'm going to Let's Play Allied General for the Windows 98 computer system, which is the oldest of the computer systems that I didn't like. I was comfortable with Windows 95. Why did Windows 98 have to come along and change things? But we'll watch the intro and I'll try to keep quiet until we get at least through the intro, and then I'll talk a little bit about the game, my history with it, and we'll jump right in. I see, I'll try to be quiet. We don't know how well we'll do. America, UK, Russia, and France down there in the bottom right corner. Although it's black and white, I guess that could be Romania. Probably not, though.
Allies on the march. World in peril.
Look at that high-res imagery there.
In a series of armored offensives, Germany has carried its blitzkrieg from Poland to France through city and
There's a guy who's really not happy about it.
The Africa Corps has devoured mile after mile of the North African desert, gateway to the oil-rich Middle East. Huge panzer divisions have smashed across the vast borderlands of the Soviet Union. The Allies, with firm resolve, have gathered their forces to begin the showdown with the Axis. Millions have volunteered to join the war effort, the industrial might of America turning to arm the Allies as the indomitable British island becomes the springboard for a mighty
A
Allied
springboard moonsault.
But victory will require more than just ships, tanks, planes, and armies of brave young soldiers.
Oh, thank you, personalizedmail.com. I
It will
sure
require
hope that's
the leadership
visible.
of bold, decisive tacticians. In this dire situation, the leaders of the Allies marshal their finest commanders to lead the fight for freedom.
Yeah, so the game has an intro and then the individual scenarios, because there's multiple scenarios in this game, have intros that all take the style of an American wartime. Please enter your name. I guess I'm Mysterious JG. But yeah, the individual scenarios all have intro movies as well, and they are based around like American wartime propaganda films, the kind of newsreels that would have shown, um, when you went to the cinemas to see back in the day. Going to the cinema would be a multiple. You'd have multiple things you'd watch. You'd watch a newsreel, probably a cartoon or some kind of short before the feature. That has disappeared. It has been replaced by 20 minutes of commercials in modern cinemas, but also the seats are a lot more comfortable. And the food is a lot more expensive and also likely to kill you with cholesterol. But yeah, so Allied General. This is a game. I have a kind of a love-hate relationship with my old Panzer General LP. I'm sure I'll talk about that over the course of this Let's Play. But the first thing I have to do here is thank Lethal Feline, who, if you are someone who watches my channel, you're already familiar with Lethal. There are other series on my channel where he's lending his vocal talents. I have done stuff on his channel. We've done collab stuff with other Let's Players as well. But like I'd spent years, not actively, like every day of my life, putting in hours a day. But over the course of like a decade, I would periodically poke my head in and see, is it possible for me to properly emulate Allied General? Because not only did, at one point, Bobo got me the PS1 version, which is just a brutally bad port. That even playing it on a PS, because I did not have a working PS1. I had a PS2 that was still working, and it didn't really like playing Allied General very well. It would be huge amounts of sound glitching would occur. Not to mention it's a terrible game to try to play on a controller rather than a keyboard. But Allied General 1, like I still had my Windows 98 discs, and I still could not get that thing to play in any kind of emulation mode. Windows 98 is kind of this 95 to a lesser degree in 98. It's like whatever you'd say the opposite of a sweet spot is. A sweet spot is, a little, the temperature's a little lower, it's too cold, it's a little higher, it's too hot, but the sweet spot's just right. This would be a sour spot. if the operating system was a little older than Windows 98, it's easy to emulate with a modern computer. And if it's a little newer than Windows 98, it's fairly stable to emulate with a new computer. But there was this spot where just nothing was happening. Like modern Windows just could not figure out how to play old Windows 98 stuff. But Lethal Feline basically set me up with a new advanced computer technologies. Yeah, basically he just like fucking installed a desktop of Windows 98 on my like set it up as something he could literally send me as like here's fucking zip, just unzip this and you'll have a Windows 98 instance on your computer that plays Allied General. And I believe like the last time I actively pursued this more than 5 years ago, I don't think what Lethal has done for me would have worked, but I had given up on this basically, and like I used Panzer General Forever, a fan made version of the game, missing a lot of the bells and whistles that I enjoyed, like the animations for combat and in the intro movies and the intro, particularly the intro briefings with the great voice acting of the British and Russian American guys. Okay. But yeah, a lot of the bells and whistles were missing, so I kind of used that to showcase, like, here's why the Russian campaign's a fucking nightmare that I wouldn't really want to play anyway. And here's, and made that a Christmas special, I believe, one year. But yeah, now I can actually play it for a year, and we'll see whether this is a terrible idea. Because I haven't actually played any of the 5-star series for years now. Every so often I would break out since Lethal made this available to me, and it's been over a year that I had this in my back pocket that I could play it, but I was in the middle of doing other things. So I've played it. I've played around with it a bit since then, and it confirmed what I thought I remembered about Allied General, which is that in some ways it's a little bit harder than Panzer General, particularly in the sense, and this is really true of the Russian campaign. Um, it's to a lesser degree it's true in North Africa and Western Europe. This game starts hard and gets a little easier, whereas Panzer General starts easy and gets hard. And that kind of makes sense with there's kind of, you can think it through and it makes sense because in Panzer General you're playing as the Wehrmacht and your first couple of campaigns are against like Poland, who was not prepared and did not have any aid from, you know, the powers that would eventually oppose and defeat Germany. And then you can do the Norway campaign, which is a big jump up in difficulty for various reasons, but that's like optional. And then you have like going through the Benelux countries, where there's a little bit of French and British support, but you're mostly facing like Luxembourg and Belgium. Like yeah, like it starts off fairly easy, and you can build up experience for your units and get better units. And then by the time you get to France, the game still hasn't gotten that hard because I don't know if it's realistic. I don't know if this would be offensive to French listeners, but the French don't put up much of a fight. They're still fucking exhausted from World War One, and the political will isn't there, and whatever. So the German campaign starts with some easy missions where you build experience, and then it gets more difficult because it's only later that you start fighting, depending on which path you choose. Organized resistance from the Russians, where your main enemy is time and having huge swaths of land to cover, and then organized resistance to the British, who they put up a better resistance than the French had done. But the game gets harder as it goes, but you're also building up your forces. So like you can get a good army. You can go. Allied General is kind of the opposite in two ways. One, the very very first North African mission, which I'll get to here in a minute. Well, we'll start playing in a minute. The very first North African mission is a bit of a gimme, but after that they get hard because you have British forces who like your core units have zero experience, and I feel like you start off fighting Wehrmacht units that already have 2 stars worth of experience, which gives them a big initiative advantage. The RNG favors them because your initiative score, your experience score enters into initiative, which decides who fires first because there's the game mechanics are not entirely perfect simulation of how combat would go. Initiative is massively important, and yeah, you end up the Wehrmacht is tough to beat early, and then as you're beating them down, you're finding like less well-equipped German forces. So my memory, and maybe I'll prove this wrong, the maps get bigger, the Allied and Axis armies get bigger on the map, and the maps get more complicated, but like if you're building up your core units as the British, for example, you've got really experienced units that are bowling over the Germans at the end of the campaign. But at the beginning of the campaign, it's really tough because you tend to be outnumbered. Um, the other thing that makes it kind of difficult is Panzer General you had this like the whole core mechanic was that you have core units and auxiliary units, and core units are yours, and you take them from scenario to scenario. So if you win in Poland, your core units that you used in that are the same units that you'll be deploying to fight in Finland and to fight in Belgium. The same, but and there are also auxiliary units that you don't bring with you, but they're there on the map, and you can build them, but don't spend too many resources on them because you really want to concentrate on the core units you'll be using again and again. This game has the same mechanic, but your proportion of what units are core that you bring with you and what units are auxiliary is much smaller. Like you have this very very small limited core of core units that you get to build up and carry from scenario to scenario. So you're kind of much more reliant on what does the scenario actually give you rather than I spent the last 3 or 4 scenarios building up um, an elite Panzer Corps and kind of limited what I did for air power. So I'm going to rely on Panzer supremacy rather than air supremacy. Or, I really worked hard to get a fighter corps that will give me not just air superiority, but air supremacy early. And then I've got a core group of bombers. And my tanks, I didn't build up a lot of extra tank units, but I always have some for my auxiliary force. And I'm just going to bomb the shit out of them. And as the Germans, this is particularly useful for those people, I'll get into this later, who bragged about how good they were at the game, but they also went into the options and shut off weather so that they could consistently use their air force and never had to pray that there was no rain. Um, but in this game, you have such a small core force, you really do have to you can kind of try to favor having a really strong air force or whatever, but it's going to be hard because you only get to like build like 1 or maybe 2 new core units per mission, and you really have to depend a lot on what the game is giving you for core units or for auxiliary units. The other thing that makes this game start pretty difficult is that you are on defense from the beginning, and you eventually switch to being on offense. The Panzer General or the General Series AI is better. It's not that great on offense, so you will have a tendency like if it's a mission where you're on offense and the pre-placed defenders were placed by the map designers in places that are difficult to get them out, um, and the AI is in defensive mode, so it's not good making unnecessary moves. It's kind of challenging. If they're trying to take your entrenched positions, they're not always very smart about it. But in these early missions against the Wehrmacht, they just have you outnumbered. And they just have the ability to kill your units if you put them out in any kind of danger. So we will see all of that as we go. Anyway, we have so I'm like halfway through a video here, so let's get moving. We've got Britain and her allies clash with the combined forces of Italy and Germany in the desert of Sands, North Africa. Western Europe campaign, where you can play as the Americans or the British. Say to liberate Europe, start as either the American forces landing in Operation Torch or as the British forces in the Meath Line. And then the most difficult of the campaigns, Russia, Finland to Berlin. War in the East from the invasion of Finland to the Great Patriotic War, the German attack and the struggle for the Russian heartland and the Red Army's march to Berlin. I think I will come back and do this eventually, but this one in particular is really frustrating at the beginning. It's very frustrating at the beginning. And then the second half of the campaign is all about you being given unreasonable time limits. Well, we'll get into that later if we get to it. But for now, we will start with North Africa. I'm going to keep the experience on the defaults. I'm going to keep supply on, weather on. Basically, I'm playing with all of the... should you show opponents' moves? Yeah. I think this only shows the moves that you would be able to see. But we're going to do show opponents' moves, and basically, other than that, I'm playing with the defaults. And I'm sure I'll talk about this as we go. Panzer General was a very frustrating LP because I had a ton of people come in the comments, and I got major victory in like every scenario, but people would still come in and tell me how much better they were at the game than I was. And I would find people saying like, why don't you turn show hidden units on? The AI can see your units, which is probably true, but like, no, it's not. You're not supposed to be able to see exactly where they are. Like that's part of the game is like, oh, like if you went out and took extreme risks based on knowing exactly where they are and not having to be worried about a counterattack because you know things the commander wouldn't know, Similar to turning weather off. Oh, you really use your Air Force to mop up if you turn off weather. Well, guess what? Montgomery couldn't turn off weather. You know, um, what's his name? Rommel, that magnificent son of a bitch. I read your book. He couldn't turn off weather. Weather doesn't matter much at all in the desert campaign anyway. But yeah, let's. So I'll do show opponents moves, and if it turns out it's showing me moves for hidden units, then I will have to turn that off. Would you like to create a dossier? No, I don't actually care about that mechanic. So let's. Maybe we'll actually get to gameplay. I talked longer than I meant to before getting this one rolling. I could have talked for an hour about the Panzer General Let's Play and what a strange experience that was. Patriot Productions, including France, because there's 4 corners to a square and we needed a 4th country. There is no campaign where you play as the Free French.
Allies on the march. Desert Duel.
Stereotypical Middle Eastern
January
music.
1942. Italy has struck into North Africa, intent on creating a Mediterranean empire. This opens the way for the German war machine to secure the gateway to the Middle East. If the Axis succeeds here, the Wehrmacht can slake its growing thirst for oil with the bottomless reserves of Arabia.
As seen by this scary graphic.
Germany has sent the best to lead the best. Erwin Rommel will lead his newly assembled Africa Corps. He plans to use these same panzer troops which captured Poland with terrifying speed and ferocity to crush the greatly outgunned British troops entrusted with holding Egypt. The British have little to sustain them besides their bravery and wits. It will have to be enough, for any hope for an Allied return to Europe rests on their shoulders.
You had Monty there. I don't remember if they get into naming him. This game is part of a weird cultural trend of like semi-deifying Rommel. Um, it's popular amongst people who want to talk in positive terms about the German war machine and how effective it was, but understandably are uncomfortable talking about Hitler too much. Hitler's not going to come up by name in any of the general games, as far as I can remember. But yeah, so this game will occasionally make reference to Rommel as being your rival, although his name, I don't think he would have been name dropped in newsreels. Like, I don't think the American public was keeping track of which German commander was who. They knew Hitler and von Ribbentrop and Goebbels and some of the political figures. I don't think Rommel was like getting name dropped. He's somebody who's become like a figure of obsessive study since, and not from the time. But that, as you can see, our whole mission here is we are trying to stop the Germans from making their way into the Middle East because they'll screw everything up. Luckily, in real history, the English were able to hold the Middle East, which is why everything in the Middle East is so stable today, thanks to the calming influence of the British Empire.
Sir, as you well know, since September the Italians have pushed as far east as Sidi Barrani. Whilst they may have suspended their advance, their presence remains a threat to the stability of the region and to our reserves of petrol. High Command has instructed us to proceed at top gear with the resources we have to hand and dislodge the Italians from
Well, I mean, he said
colonies.
petrol. I assume he means gas. I'm trying to translate for the benefit of my viewers. Also, we are to proceed at Top Gear, which I guess was the show that got in trouble for making fun of Indian food. That shows what I know about Top Gear. But yeah, this is the only mission in the game where we will fight. It's one of only 2 missions in the game where you don't fight German forces at all. The other one being in the Russian campaign, where the first mission is against Finland. But this is the only mission where you fight nothing but Italians, and I guess it's based on actual historical analysis of their performance during the war, but the Italians are not as threatening as the Germans in this game, although completely disregarding some of their units is a mistake. They certainly have units that can be a threat to you. So anyway, let's see. This it's so small on my screen. I probably need to do something about that for future videos. So Sidi Barrani. We hold Sidi Barrani. We are trying to dislodge the Italians from Tobruk. from Benghazi. Hillary lied and people died. And isn't there... am I misremembering this map? I guess I am. This is a tiny little map. One of the things that can be confusing in this game, for my memory, is that the same map, physical map, appears over and over and over, and sometimes expands to include more cities. But yeah, we're going to be fighting on the same ground, especially if I get minor victories so that we can see some of the missions you don't have to play. We're going to be fighting across the same ground over and over and over, going back and forth with the Germans. But for now, we want to shell. Oh, I need to turn animations on because I like the battle animations. It's part of what was fun about the game for me as a little fella. And by little fella, I mean I was playing this game in like college. Where is that option at? Next unit. Try to remember what my edit, maybe settings, combat animations. I don't know why they default to being off. They are not changed since Panzer General 1. Oh, CPA. Yeah, okay, this is great. Outlook is going to be giving us updates. That's fantastic. Your entrenchment level is 0, so I don't really... I could probably be better served getting rid of your artillery support, which I almost have done. So British infantry against Italian. Can you guys actually march out of there? You can. So what we want to do now is... I do want to take Tobruk on the first turn, but by using all of my artillery, I might not be able to dislodge those guys and the anti-tank immediately. The anti-tank will be a bit in the way here. And they get to fire first, but luckily they're not going to do any damage. That's excellent. Okay. Let's see here. I'm trying to like completely min-max this for... Oh, this is... See, this is the other interesting thing. I've got a 2-star... In this case, it's 2 medals experience unit. You can see up here in the top left. 82nd Great British Infantry 39. Ammo 6, fuel 0, entrenchment 0. And then there's 2 little icons there that look like medals. It's that they have 2 out of 5 for their experience. That's an auxiliary unit. And the same thing here. I had 2 stars of 2 medals of experience on this auxiliary unit. My core units have 0. I need to concentrate on getting them experience. But they're terrible right now. I'm really hoping I can sort of overperform and get a kill here, and I can't. I didn't even dislodge them from the physical space. But these guys are actually, these auxiliary units are actually better units. But I really want to try and use my core units for combat. This isn't what I wanted. This isn't what I wanted at all. Here we go. Let's kill the... I killed 5 and suppressed 4. How did they retreat? I thought they started with 10. I lost track of something there. Anyway, this first turn's actually not going that great. I was hoping to actually take Tobruk on the first turn, and I might have been able to do it. But we're actually gonna let them keep Tobruk for a turn. But this isn't a great start, honestly. I kind of want the tanks moving west really rapidly because we've got... preferably they will be coming across the rough here and attacking Benghazi from the south, while the infantry will press through on the north. And on this very first turn, I do get to purchase, as you can see here, I'm only allowed to purchase 2 more units, 1 core and 1 auxiliary, and I'm not allowed on this first battle to start. I can't like get an early start going on air at all. This is an all ground mission. So we'll buy a tank here on the very first turn. It won't get to act, but at least we'll have a core unit that can get some experience in this battle. I don't know that much about the British tanks, but you've got basically at this point the Matilda and the Mark 1 / Mark 3 kind of look the same. The Matildas have really high ground defense. Basically, they're just really hard to kill. And I remember that, like, if I saw a Matilda in the British Army when playing Panzer General, like, I went out of my way to get bombers over there to take it out because it was just going to sit there and sop up time and turns from my Panzer units, and my infantry would just be almost incapable of taking them out. But they have terrible, fairly low initiative, and the Matilda 1 has like miserable attack values. It's just this fucking brick sitting there in the battlefield that you can't get rid of. Matilda 2 is not very good against infantry, but it will kill your tanks. But they both have terrible movement speed and very low fuel. So like they're kind of okay on defense, but they're not great at all on offense. These guys have like almost twice the movement. This one literally has twice the movement, and they've got about the same fuel. Fuel is a problem because the less fuel you have, the more often you have to spend an entire turn refueling before you can move. But this one here, the most expensive one, oh, this costs 132. It's got 5 movement. This is so tiny on my screen. I need to probably adjust my screen settings later. Because the Matilda 2 is really going to be useful to fight against the Germans on defense in the next mission, but I'll barely get any utility out of it here. This one, why is this one so cheap? It only costs 120. 3 and 8 for the attack values, 5 and 8, initiative 7, initiative 7. This one has less movement, but is actually a better combat vehicle. So let's buy this. Because it costs a little less than the Matilda 2. This thing is much easier to kill, but I don't really want Matildas. The Matildas are going to be great when I'm on defense and terrible when I'm on offense. So that's their turn. I tell you what, I talked a lot in this first video. We'll be right into combat in the next one. So in the next video, well, I'll tell you what, we'll do 1 turn for the Axis here, just so I can find out whether or not we see all of their movements or only the ones that should be visible to us. We're seeing all of their movements. That doesn't even make sense. Why would you have hidden units kept on? Whatever, right? So we need to get rid of it because we have like accidental view of what their stuff is. I was hoping we would only see the units move that would be visible to us. I thought I remembered it working that way in Panzer General. Apparently it does not in this game. So we will have to go into the options. I mean, yeah, 1 turn of the very easiest mission. I hope you don't believe that invalidates the entire Let's Play. But we're already off to a bit of a less good start than I was hoping for. We're going to call this UK1. And eventually I need to get better save games names. And we're going to call it a video. And when we come back next time, we will hopefully fully drive the British or the Italians out of Tobruk and make up for lost time. Because we really were meant to take that city on the first turn and already have them in retreat. Whereas I wanted to get these tanks to get rid of that recon unit and start pushing west right away. See you guys next time.